What's up, y'all, and welcome into the Jack Vita Show. I'm your host, Jack Vita, here for a special edition of the podcast. Today, we have a great guest joining us, a major league pitcher. He's pitched on a number of teams, most memorably the Oakland Athletics, and currently, last year, he spent the last year and a half or so in independent league. He's trying to get his way back up to the big leagues. We've got Ryan Dull on with us. Ryan, first of all, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having on. Thanks for having me on today.
So let me ask you this. You came up with the A's around, I think, 2016. Was that when you made your debut, or 2015?
2015. So I made it September 1 of 2015. That was when I first got called up.
So I have to think you spent at least some time in the minors with Dylan Overton.
Just a little bit.
Little
Yeah.
bit. Okay.
Just a little bit, because like he was like I think a year or two behind me draft wise. So I like our paths crossed a little bit, and then he had a little bit of time with us when he got called up as well.
So I sat next to his wife. I think her name is Morgan. It was a 2016 spring training game at Hohokam Park. I just randomly was sitting next to his family. They were great people.
They really are. You definitely know, like, he has that like country vibe to him, like being from like or went to school like in Oklahoma. So you definitely could understand the vibe that he had.
Yeah, I haven't met him yet. Maybe I will at some point, but his wife and his family, they were great people, very nice. Like you said, Oklahoma, Southern, good manners. Yeah, that was did you like Hohokam Park?
I liked it. I actually got to see the full transformation. So in 2013, when I was in the fall league, that's the stadium we played at. That was right before the Cubs' new stadium was like it was
Sloan
got
Park.
finished. Sloan Park got finished in like that off season, so they opened up. So like that next year is when the A's like took over Hohokam. But I actually like I played there like in rookie ball, but then playing there in the fall league, like our last home game, we saw all the A's staff and like their grounds crew, everybody coming in, taking measurements about like what they were going to change. And then coming into like a spring training game a couple years later, like in 2016 was actually like one of my first real games there. And just seeing it actually completed and like what they changed, it was like a remarkable just transformation of the whole facility.
Yeah, it's really nice. Some might say it's nicer than where the A's currently play for their
Well,
big league games.
the stadium wise, like you can just tell, like the Coliseum, like it was built in the '60s and it still has that vibe. I don't know how it is currently because I know once the Raiders left for Vegas, the A's moved actually up into the Raiders locker room, so like it's a lot more spacious for them. So I don't know how they redesigned like the layout, but listening to players like infielders, they said the playing surface though is one of the best in the big leagues though.
Oh, okay, very cool. So, did you ever meet Joe Pun?
No, I've never paths never crossed.
Have you heard of him?
No.
He's the guy who manages Hohokam Park. He's another guy
Really?
that I know. Yeah, great guy.
Great
Great
guy.
guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know the people that took care of like their minor league facility, but never actually met the head groundskeeper there.
So, yeah, he just manages the whole facility. So, he runs spring training, I guess. But I'm curious, 2016 or no, was it maybe it was 2015. I think it's 2015. That was when Will Ferrell came to spring training. Were you around that day?
I was not because I was in like minor league camp that day, but I wasn't one of like the extra backups or anything that day. So it's like I think I was at home, like just like in the apartment, just hanging out, like knowing that was going on, but not a part of it at all. I just
Y-
remember hearing stories from guys that were there.
What stories did you hear?
I just like trying to be because like you could tell like he was guys were saying like he was all business when he was trying to get it done. But it's like he had that joking, like some people tried to just use like movie quotes that he did, but it's more like he was like all business about it. Like he wanted to actually make it seem like realistic and like took it serious out on the field.
Yeah, that for those who don't know, Will Ferrell did a cool, it's a fun special on HBO. Did you ever see the special?
I did not see the special, but I remember seeing highlights of each position just sprinkled in throughout the day.
So he played all 10 positions, all 9 fielding positions and DH
Mhm.
for in 5 different games for 10 different teams in one day. And it's a really fun special. I think he played baseball in high school because at one point he actually made contact with a pitch and fouled it off. I was pretty surprised by that.
Yeah, I think everybody was surprised, especially I'm probably even the pitcher that was facing him was probably surprised.
Did you spend any time around Barry Zito?
Actually, a good amount of time because in 2015, when I got called up to AAA, he was in Nashville at the
Yeah.
time, and so like our lockers weren't that far apart, so I got to spend time like on the road, and then especially like during my first couple of days in Nashville, like he just came around and like introduced himself. And because I had like my hair grown out at that time too, he just took like 3 guesses. It's like, I'm going to take 3 guesses on where you're from. And he came down to final two were California and South Carolina. So I told him like, you're actually pretty close just by the guessing. But I chance to like talk to him about a little bit about pitching, but also it's like that's when he was really getting into his music at the time. So he was like talking about like the songwriting process. And then when I got called up and they brought him up for that game for Hudson versus Zito during that last little stretch, we were actually he was on a road trip with us in Houston, and we were all like just hanging out in the hotel room when we first got there. And he just see him with his guitar and his notebook and just listening to everything going on in the room and just writing everything down. And then he had us all just play a couple games to help him just like piece together songs. So that was actually pretty cool, like being a part of just like his life after baseball. Like you could tell, like he was very much interested in that, and just the baseball aspect was just a fun thing for him.
Yeah, I read his book. Have you read his book?
I haven't read the book yet.
Highly recommend it. It's called Curveball, and it's about his actual faith journey of how
Mhm.
he ended up becoming a Christian. It's a great story, and he talks about that one year where he pretty much knew that he was, as much as he'd like to get that crack at the big leagues, and he
Yeah,
did get it.
he did.
He did get to pitch against. They had him throw against Hudson. Was that the only game he pitched that year in the bigs? Or maybe.
It might have been, yeah. Yeah, I remember that day very thoroughly.
Oh man, what do you remember about that day?
I gave up a grand slam.
Oh no.
That was like the I think if it wasn't for like that one day, it's like that was like my September ERA would have been really good that fall or that September. But I like that's why I remember it very thoroughly because it was like
Ah,
the one time that like we all wore like our pant legs up to honor him. So it's like we were all going to do it in unison. That's the only time I've ever done it. So it's like I'm never doing that again.
so you're an anti-high socks guy?
I am now, but like when I was a kid growing up, I was all for it because wanting to emulate Chipper Jones. So like that's why I did it when I was a kid. But when I got to like high school and college, like we weren't really able to do it. So like that's when I went away from it.
They didn't let you do it?
High school, no. High school and
Wow.
college, no. Like it was, you could do it if you wanted to, but they didn't really have like the pant sizes that fit me. So it's like I can't do it.
Interesting. Was Chipper your favorite player growing up?
Yeah, one of them. Yeah, I mean, you had the whole like Braves dynasty. Like, so we're in Braves country here, so like that's what I grew up on, and those are the guys that kind of wanted to just emulate, like, especially like going through little league and everything.
So that's really cool. And Zito, for those who don't know, he wrote this great book, but he talked about how he it seemed like he didn't expect to really have a big major league role. But that year, was it 2014 or no, it's 2015, right?
2015,
2015.
2015.
Yeah, so he spent the whole year in Nashville, and it worked out really well for him as he transitioned into creating music, recording music, and he's got some good songs out there. He's done very well for himself as a musician, so he got to pitch and maybe mentor some of you guys a little bit.
He did.
And yeah, he did.
He did. Yeah, he took like just like because that was when a lot of our younger guys we were trained. Like some of us were moving up quicker than others, so it was like just kind of just pick the brains of everybody that we could while we were there.
Did he teach you the curveball?
No, I didn't. At that point, is like my curveball days were long behind me. So it's
When
like
did sorry.
uh, my junior year of college when I stopped throwing a curveball. It was going after scout day. My pitching coach pulled me aside and said that the teams like they like it, but it said like it's never going to be a successful pitch for you. So it's like you're going to have to get rid of it if you want to have a shot at the next level. So like that day was the last day I ever threw a curveball.
Wow. So
And then
what's your current pitch mix? What are you throwing now?
it's just fastball slider, and then I've been working on a just fine tuning a changeup again. It's like I went away from it a couple years ago, based off of just analytics from certain teams. They told me not to throw it again, but now I'm at the point where it's like maybe I should just have it, just to have it in my back pocket.
That makes sense. What's the off season like? What are you doing right now? Staying loose.
So I spent like a month in the Dominican, so I was still actually like competitively throwing. But once I came home and got married, I was just transitioned to my off season at that point. And so it's like I didn't never stop throwing. It was more we just fine tune just intensity. But now like I've built back up to doing throwing bullpens. So I'm about like 2 weeks into bullpens right now, and just building up to maybe do some showcases in the next month or so.
What's a showcase like? What do you do? How's that happen?
So it depends on the facility that like I do it at. So you can either just throw like a bullpen with like teams and scouts there, or you can actually some facilities run like a live scrimmage where you have hitters in the box and they can get a better feel of what your stuff is. It'll depend on what the facility wants to do that day if they have enough like hitters to be able to do that.
So a lot of people don't understand how competitive independent league baseball is. And I know it a little bit, even though I've never been to an indie league game, but I had some buddies who were tremendous college players
Mhm.
and they did not get drafted. They were guys who had scouts looking at them and thought at one point that they might get drafted. They didn't get drafted, but one guy was like an all Big Ten type player. Another guy was all Horizon League type player. So a little smaller scale, but still great college players. And these guys went into Indie League really trying to carve out a role for themselves and get that opportunity. And both of them had difficulty just landing on an Indie League roster. So, were you, when you made this adjustment and went over to Indie League, were you a little like, wow, these guys are really good?
It was essentially like when I got there, it was more of is like I took some like pieces of what I was trying to do analytically with the team I got released from. And so it's like I took that opportunity. It's like, all right, this is a great opportunity. It's like I'm just going to try it and try to maybe like fully commit to it and see what kind of results I can get. But it's like I knew it was going to be like a big feel, just like how is it going to like feel on the mound. But then it's like looking at competition. I remember like one of my first couple outings when once I got there, and just is a lineup full of former big leaguers. So it's you're you're still like some of these guys might be like a little bit like a couple years removed from like affiliated or the big leagues, but it's like these still guys you can tell that they have the game plan and like what made them successful big leaguers, and like they're still like very good athletes and like they know what they're doing at the plate. So like it's still like a big adjustment, like getting back to that. But then also but then you could see some guys that were a little bit younger that they haven't fully developed yet either. So it's like finally like trying to understand which guys had approaches and which guys like maybe I faced in the past that like I had a good idea how to attack. But then also when it comes to having catchers that maybe didn't get to the highest level, but like they're still learning the game. So it's trying to teach them how to call games as well with what you're seeing as well. And then that way, so it's essentially just trying to adjust to everybody.
And try to, like you said, get a little bit of work in
Hmm.
terms of showing what you can do, and then to maybe practicing some pitches that you hadn't thrown, like going back to that changeup.
Correct. Yeah, and that's where essentially that's where like we were at like last year. We were just trying some like tried a couple different like mechanic things and see what kind of results we got, and like it worked for like for the most part all year. And but then it just gets to the point where you're seeing like the same guys over and over again. So it's like eventually people will figure out like it happens at every level. So it's then working with the younger players like, all right, now they figured it out. What are you going to do to adjust to their adjustment? So it's trying to just teach the younger players like the mentality of how to be a successful player at every level. And once people figure out, it's like, what are you going to do next now to adjust? So that's what we try to just get everybody to learn. It's like it's a constant game of adjustments at every place you go.
Makes a lot of sense. So, what is something or a couple things that you think the average fan who might be a Major League Baseball fan might not know about independent league baseball?
I mean, it's still filled with like lots of talent, but I think it's more of like with it being like a lot of them being like MLB partner leagues. Like in the past, they've tried out different rules. A couple of them being like the ones they're like the pitch clock. The no shift is like they did do that one. I wasn't a part of it, but they have done that in the past. And even in the minor leagues, I was part of like the pitch clock. But now what they did this year with like the disengagements, like that's all going to be a brand new. Like I was not a part of that part of the testing, so it'll be a different adjustment for everybody. But for fans, is like you're still seeing like MLB caliber players. It's just whether or not they fully get an opportunity, or maybe that the guys that have been in MLBs, like maybe they're playing for fun at this point in their careers. Like their end goal is not to get back to the big leagues. They're just playing to play just for the fun of it until they feel like they've had enough. So I think you get a big variety of the type of people that are still playing independent ball, like from the young kids that are trying to get in the door to the guys that are just enjoying their last year or two.
So, you never made a major league start, correct? Only relief appearances?
Only relief appearances,
At
yeah.
what point did you transition? Because I think you had to have been a starter in high school, right? At what point did you transition primarily to relief?
Once I got drafted. So I was a starter all through high school and starter all through college. I got mixed in a couple relief appearances here and there, especially like my freshman and sophomore year of college. But then once I got to pro balls, like I already had so many innings under my belt before I even signed that they just left me in the bullpen so they could monitor my innings. And then when I went to Instructs that fall, they gave me essentially a choice if I wanted to be a starter or reliever, and I chose reliever mainly because like I enjoyed like that summer just throwing out the bullpen, and I never started. I never became a real starter after that. I became like coming back for like rehabs. I did like an opener where I would throw like my one inning, and then I think a couple years ago, like a couple teams were doing opener stuff. So it's like I was part of an opener in like a minor league game, but no like official as a starter.
Did that feel different from making an appearance in the eighth inning?
Is a little bit different, especially like rehab wise. It didn't feel any different. It's like I'm there. It's like I had a different mentality, but actually, like knowing you're starting a game on purpose, like not for a rehab anything, is like it took me back. It's like it took me back a while. It's like I hadn't done it in almost 10 years. It's like I don't remember this feeling, but you try to treat it as just like a normal relief outing as best as you can.
So you were selected in the 32nd round of the 2012 draft. That's correct, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So did you play high school, or were you drafted out of high school? Did you go to college?
I went to college, so I had a high school was just more of just not really heavily recruited as like a late bloomer. So I went to like I was actually like a preferred walk on to UNC Asheville, which is a small like D1 school up in
Yeah.
the mountains. And
They've had some
essentially
good basketball teams too. They've
very
had
good
some teams.
basketball.
Yeah.
Very good basketball. But essentially after like my first 2 years there, like I had to play my way into a scholarship my last 2 years.
Wow.
So it was like that, but like there's essentially took a chance of going there somewhere I knew I could play as a freshman instead of sitting behind older guys. Like it's like you're not going to get anywhere if you're just sitting on the bench the whole time. So I knew I could had a good chance there, and then was there for 4 years and got drafted after my senior season.
Drafted by the Oakland A's, a team that has a an amazing reputation as being extremely smart analytically and good at managing its finances, for lack of a better term. You've got Moneyball, which is a great movie. Billy Beane is now stepping down from what he's done. But was there a part of you that when you were drafted by the A's, you felt a little flattered? You're like, wow, like this team knows what they're doing.
A little bit. I just knew going into draft day is like I was down to two teams that I'd been in contact the most with were Oakland and Atlanta. And
So
but
you want to play for your hometown
I
favorite
did.
team. Yeah.
I thought it was going to be really true, but I heard from the A scout like right before they took me. So he actually gave me time to pull up the audio, and so one of my friends actually recorded it for me. And but I just remember like a whole like the reason I got drafted was like a big like story from college, because it all came down to, like my college like head coach. Like we had like a huge storm coming in, and it was the A scout and the Brave scout were there to see me and their other starters. So it was like my college coach said, so like, we're gonna play until it rains. Like you're here to see these guys for a reason. And so we got 7 innings in, and they saw everything they needed to see. And I remember my head coach told the A's scouts like, it's like, we let you see him. It's like, now you got to do me a favor. And that's when it happened. Like that day was essentially what put me pretty much on the draft board.
So have you been surprised at how pitching has changed over the last decade? I mean, there are guys that are now able to increase their velocity. I don't know if you've been able to increase your velocity, but also another thing is the way that relief pitchers are used. And how starters really don't go as deep into games. Is there anything about how this sport has changed that has surprised you in either of those regards?
I'd say for me, like I knew just like being based off like my degree, like getting like health and wellness and like knowing what the body's capable of, and like it's an ever evolving door that like something new is always going to, and there's going to be different ways to get everything out of your body. I knew that physically people were going to eventually find a way to just keep increasing that average velocity, and guys are going to be able to do more with their bodies. Just it was a matter of time till somebody like figured that out, and now everybody's like starting to catch on to it. I knew that from a physical standpoint that was going to happen, but for me is like I wasn't expecting like the starting pitching just be like a five and dive like a lot more when it came to like the analytics. I wasn't prepared for that, or I wasn't like didn't think that would happen in our day and age, especially coming from like the 90s, early 2000s, where it was standard for like most of your starters to go into the seventh, throw 100, 120 pitches every outing, instead of now guys are sometimes even getting pulled after like 70 pitches. So like that was, I think, the biggest shock that I've seen. And then that also like now with how much like the reliever's body has changed and how much they're able to like throw and like with a high velocity each and every day. I think that's where managers is like, well, I can use all these guys a lot more. And so like why would I have a starter try to go a third time through the order when I've got all these horses just ready to go each and every day?
Yeah, it's definitely all of that stuff you talk about is like things that this sport has evolved in a lot of ways. You made your debut in September of 2015. I've only been to one A's game ever. I was there in May of 2015. Actually, wait, let me see. Do I have it here? Where is it? I have oh yes, here it is. One second. From my bobblehead shelf. Have you seen this before?
I have seen it. I saw that. My very first spring, like full big league spring training, I saw it.
So those who are this is a Stephen Vogt NBA referee bobblehead. It needs new batteries. It talks. He does his two shots. You know, he does his impression of the referee. So you saw him do that impression?
I did. He was actually Stephen Vogt was actually the catcher for my debut as well.
Oh wow.
So like I remember for my first day he came came out to the outfield during BP and talked to me about like what I wanted, how I wanted to approach, like what things I was still trying to work on. So like we had a game plan before I even got onto the mound.
He seems like I've never met him, but I remember I had a connection. I met with Lou Wolf, who was one of the owners of the team at the time, and he described Stephen Vogt to me as if he was not a Major League Baseball player, he would be a cast member on Saturday Night Live. Like, that's
100%.
how talented this guy is.
Yes, I agree 100%. I think someday he's probably going to be a great big league manager as well.
I could see that. Yeah, he was always great on intentional talk. He did that ref thing on there. He did his Chris Farley impression. Did you get to see any other impressions that he did? Was there any other funny stuff that maybe we haven't seen on TV before?
Those were the main two that I remember seeing the most. Just because like it's one of those things like you get a lot of new faces every spring training. So it's like some people like they maybe just seen the video, but seeing it in person is just different than seeing it on video.
So he was and he could sing too, right? You
A
ever
little bit,
sing?
yeah. A
Little
little
bit,
bit,
little bit.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, he's always been one of my favorite characters in terms of just, someone who's funny, someone who's entertaining. So that's really cool that you got to work with him. It was interesting because you were part of that 2016, 2015, like that part of the A's where they were in a rebuild. And I actually thought going into 2016 that the team could have surprised some people because I thought there was a lot of talent on that team. And then you guys didn't end up doing that year, but then a couple years later, 2018, you guys turned that corner, get to the playoffs, and really a lot of really good young players started coming up through that pipeline. Matt Chapman, Matt Olson, Marcus Semien. Like you guys had a really fun core to watch there for a few years.
We did. I just remember 2012 was like our draft year. Like that's where it all started. Like the core, like they had very successful drafts when it comes to like big league talent from 2012, 13, 14, 15. All of those guys, once we all got to the big leagues, like you could just tell that the vibe was different. It's like we all knew how to win. It's like we all started together in low A. They did well in high A, double A, triple A. Is like every level that we were all together, we just won. And like we just had that winning mentality. And it's like once you get guys into the big leagues and let them get their feet wet a little bit and get comfortable, it's like that's when you could see that they were ready just to take off.
Yeah, in 2016, I remember they kind of brought in some veteran guys, just some sort of bridge players before all you guys came up. You were already up at that point. Chris Coughlin was on that team at one point, and then he ends up going back over the Cubs. And I felt bad for him too. He got surprise traded after they brought back Dexter Fowler as a surprise.
Yeah, we were actually. I remember the day we actually traded for him because we were actually on the agility field like during our warm up, and they came over and got. I don't remember the pitcher that he was traded for, but they came over and got the pitcher and told him he just got traded like while we were stretching. I vividly remember that trade.
Yeah, and I can't remember that pitcher's name either. Honestly, feel bad for him now that we can't remember his name, but yeah.
There's a lot of trades that have happened, so it's just so many moving parts
Yeah.
constantly.
Yeah. So you set a Major League Baseball record and you have a jersey in Cooperstown. What is that record? Go ahead and tell us about it.
So it is the most inherited runners stranded consecutively. So it's 36 straight runners that were stranded. And so I remember vividly it was on 4th of July was the day I set the record because I remember once I came in, got out of the inning, that I was just sitting in the locker room after doing my arm care and working out that one of our media relations guys came up to me and said, we're going to have like, we finish this game and we win, we're going to have you come back out and do the post game interview. And that's when I found out that the record was broken. And that was I had no idea that I even had a record going that day until like I had to answer all the media questions the following morning or the following afternoon. Cause I think we went to Houston right after that. So it's like I had to answer the questions in Houston. And of course the streak broke the next outing.
Oh man, yeah. Well, that's really cool record, and I mean, you must have been inserted into a lot of high leverage situations that
Oh,
year.
a whole lot of high leverage situations. I remember talking with Vogt even after a couple of those outings, like walking back to the dugout, and he's just sitting there. Is like, "How in the world did you manage to get out of this inning?" It's like, honestly, I couldn't tell you. It's like there are days where like you come in there, is like, come in. I remember one time came in, bases loaded, I think one out, and it's like facing I think Elvis Andrews, who's one of the best like pure contact hitters. Is like any little thing can happen or and then came out of that outing, struck out two guys in the inning. It's like I don't know how that even physically happened. Or it's like, but also it's a great thing of how good like our defense helped me out. Like it's also like there's a lot of luck involved too. Like the ball getting hit to the right spot, guys making the right play, and just a ball not taking a bad hop either. Because like one bad hop like on a ground ball or just a bad hop on a breaking ball in the dirt, like and it goes right by the catcher, like that ends the streak. Like just a lot of luck and just I guess just a lot of like big situations, but it also like I was happy or just a sense of pride is like that as a rookie that the manager that Bob Melvin's like trusted me in those situations, especially as a rookie.
How'd you like playing for Bob Melvin?
I loved it. Just there is just he was definitely tell like he's just a nice like he's one of the better like player managers. Just the constant communication with everything that's going on, and you just tell like why everybody like why people want to play for him.
Yeah, I think he was a big difference maker for the Padres to finally end that. I mean, they made the playoffs in 2020, but that was a 60 game season, and they hit. Other than that, it had been 16 years since they had made the playoffs. Even longer than that, since they had won a playoff series. I think he was a big part of that this past year.
Oh, 100%, especially with like the mind that he has on when it like certain situations, what to do, who to go for. Like he has like just a list of things that like as games are going on, he already has like thought out scenarios of like what's going to happen here, here, and here. Like he's like 3, 4 moves ahead of the other manager every single time. Like he's talking about something that might happen in the eighth, seventh, eighth inning during like the third inning. Like he's already like mapped out everything, and him and Ryan Christensen definitely work well together. So like, because I played for Ryan coming up through the minor league systems at a couple different stops. Like, just like both of their baseball minds, you can just tell that they're very well prepared every game.
So, is there one or two guys that you had gotten out early in your career when you were like really excited to be in the show and you hadn't established yourself yet? And you're like, oh my gosh, I just got that guy out.
Mhm. Well, my first two outings were against the Angels. So like other like my first night I didn't face him, but like my second day in the big leagues, you're having to face Cole Calhoun, Mike Trout, Albert Pujols, and it just said, "Here you go, good luck." And I was like, "This is only my second day." Like, and just I remember just sitting like watching games in the past. Is like, how in the world do people get these guys out? And it's like now like I actually have to get these guys out. So I think that was probably just one like the moments this is like, all right, it's just do or die time. And I remember talking to Bob Melvin like after I finished my last outing that September, and he just says like, we wanted to just see what you were made of. Like after your first outing, we let you get your feet wet, but after that, I face the heart of the order almost every single outing. So like we wanted to see what you can do, and it's like that was the perfect way to just prove that you can belong up here.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like if I was facing Trout, if I was in your position, if I was facing someone like Trout, and I'm a professional, obviously it'd be a little like, wow, I have to get Trout out. But honestly, I think I'd be more, for lack of a better word, starstruck by
Hmm.
facing Pujols because there's a little bit of a difference. Like I've met some people obviously in this world, and as you kind of get accustomed to it, you're not that people are just people.
Hmm.
But some of those people that were like heroes, or maybe not even heroes, but like super famous or great athletes when you were a kid that you really looked up to and admired, there'd be a little more of like, if I was facing those guys, I'd be like, oh my gosh, that's Albert Pujols. Like,
Essentially, yeah, that's especially like because I remember my brother even saying, it's like he didn't even have it. Like he got a notification that I was going in, and one of his assistant coaches told him, was like, yeah, he's facing the top of the lineup. And my brother said, all right, we're going to pause practice right now. Like, we're going to watch this. He essentially pulled it up. He's like, like, everybody was like, that was the main question I answered when I got home, like that after that September, is like, what was it like facing these guys?
That's so cool. So you played it for a couple other teams. You've played for the Yankees, the Blue Jays. You played for some minor league teams as well. I'm curious to know, going from the A's to the Yankees,
Mhm.
did you see? We mentioned it a little bit with Oco Coliseum, or now I think it might be Oracle. No, Oracle is where the Giants play. They keep changing the name of these parks.
I don't know the name anymore.
Yeah, it was Oco when I was there. But anyway, did you see a clear difference in terms of facilities going from Oakland to New York?
Oh, 100%. Especially even just being on the roadside at Yankee Stadium is 10 times different, but like actually being on the home side, it was just like night and day, just because of like when you walk in the door, like you see it's like it's the home club. Like this is what you expect, like the Yankees clubhouse and facilities to look like. Like you can only dream of it, but like when you walk in that door and see, it's like, yeah, this is exactly what I pictured it to be. And but it's like just unbelievable just walking in that door the first times. Like now I can actually say it's like I actually wore the pinstripes. So like as much as like people like where I live, like it's either you're a Braves fan or a Yankees fan for some reason. And so it's like I remember I answered more questions just for a month being with the Yankees than ever remember getting with the A's.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, I know that you're a man of faith, Ryan.
Mhm.
I'm curious to know, were you have when you were in the show, and hopefully you're getting back there very soon, but playing with the A's or one of these other teams, was there a sense of community with any other Christian guys on the team?
There's like a large like community. 'Cause I remember we would all like team to team, like we would have like our Sunday chapels, and certain teams like we would have half a team in the chapel every Sunday, and like those were our strongest core teams. Were like the larger that our chapels were, the stronger we were as a team. And I remember I had one teammate, Blake training, and
Yep,
he's actually like
Dodgers now.
yeah I actually like lived with him like when in 2018, like when I got called up for September, and just like we would have conversations just to and from the field every day, just about like how like strong our faith is, and just talking about just like life in general. And I just remember like the story, like his story of like what he was before actually he became the player he is, and just like how mentally and like how much stronger he is from like his past to like what he is now. Like that's the type of growth that you can see, and like we tried to bring that into a clubhouse and try to just have give us a lot more things to bond about. And just like on like off days walking around cities, like you find these guys and you just get to just sit and just talk about everything but baseball. And like that's when I found that like being in the big leagues was a lot more fun. It's like just like the sense of community that you have like from team to team.
So who are some of those guys who were a part of those chapels, or that you could have those conversations with?
I remember like Blake was a big one. I had a former teammate, Danny Coulomb. I played with him with the A's, and he's been with the Twins the past couple years. Those were like the two of the main guys that I would like stick with, like for the most part, when it came to going from place to place. But I mean, Vogt was a big guy, especially when I first got called up there. And then um, I'd say those were the main three. That those would be all the guys that come up to you. You're gonna like, let's go like chapels at this, and this time. Like, we'll make sure that we're all there. Like, we'll stop what we're doing to make sure we're there.
So you basically have, 8 months of the year, 9 months of the year, however long you're
Mhm.
doing baseball stuff, where I can't imagine you're able to go to church
Mm.
really at all. So was that difficult, or was the chapel really like a nice special thing that you kind of had instead of church?
It was like it's very like it's nothing beats like being at church like with the sense of community, but like that's the beauty of like baseball is like we have our own community together and we work through like different lessons like throughout the year. So I remember each year like with Oakland, like we had our own like personal binder of each specific chapel day. So like we knew we had like we were going through certain books of the Bible like for the whole season. So it kind of gave us like something that you would get at a normal church like throughout a couple months. Like that's what our whole like season was. So like we were still getting normal sermons, but it was just a little bit more condensed version. Like there was just like about 15-20 minutes is all it would take to go through the scripture that day.
Very cool. Is there a time in your life where your relationship with Christ really became much more important to you?
There were a couple times. I would say it was my senior year of high school was like when it really that was like when the first starts became very important to me. That was when we lost my grandpa, my dad's dad, by a sudden heart attack, and
Man.
then that made it a little bit stronger. Like especially like not never getting to fully say goodbye either. That was like I would say the one of the harder ones. And then I think a couple years later, we started as a family going to the beach for Thanksgiving. So that was like our way to always be with, like, spend holidays with him was like being at the beach. And then I actually lost my mom's mom in 2013.
Mm,
And that was one of the hard ones because I wasn't able to attend the funeral because
mm.
I was in Wisconsin at the time. And it's like that was like one of the ones like it's hard trying to cope with that while you're so far away and there's nobody like you that's where you have to lean on guys that are in chapel like you have this personal relationships with that's where you have to lean on them the most, especially going through that. Say and then I think 20 and then 2014 the year after like I had like struggled all year, like struggled for a good part of the year. And just I just remember sitting after like an outing or two like in August just thinking is like what do I got to do is like it's more as like my faith was being tested the most at the end of that season. It's like I know that I'm gonna get there, but it's like I can't do it by myself. Like I need like have that like that person have God by my side and like he's gonna lead you in the right direction.
Amen, brother. So the times where you have felt weak have been the times that you've been able to put the most amount of trust into God, and
Mhm.
He's been able to lead you through those situations.
Correct. Correct. That's how like I especially growing up with my house is like you just got to have you got to have a little bit more faith that you're going to be led in the right direction. You might not see it right away, but just give it a little bit of time and just let it unfold, let his plan unfold and just like trust that he's leading you in the right direction and down the right path.
Amen. Yeah, I'd say the same thing for me, man. When I've gone through some of my trials, which I actually just spoke with your wife, Brittany, on her podcast yesterday, and that's probably going to be released in a couple months.
Hmm.
So you guys can hear more about my story in that regard. But I talked a little bit about that's the same case for me is when times have been tough, those have been the great times for me to really rely on God. And I think it's harder for me, when things are going well to remind myself that, you know what, like I still need God. This is happening because of him. It's not happening. I didn't do this on my own. This was
Hmm.
him putting me in this position, and I need to remain thankful and obedient to him and ride with him through not only the bad times but also the good times.
I just remember after my first full season in 2016 that after I finished my last outing in Seattle, I remember just sitting in the tunnel with like a towel over my head, like after the pitching coach came up to me and I just sat there just like as a moment of reflection, just it's like what like I just accomplished this whole season. It's like, we couldn't do it by myself. It's like I had a lot of help and a lot of people
Hmm.
in my corner to help get me through that season. So it's like that point I knew is like you can't do it by yourself. Like as much as you might want to always do it by yourself, like, you can never do it strictly on yourself. And I actually used that after the season. I actually drove back home from Oakland to North Carolina and just used that as a time to just fully reflect on my full season and everything that happened that whole year.
Wow, that's an awesome story. Do you have a favorite Bible verse?
I use Proverbs 16:3. That's like even Brittany and I have that. Like that's part of. We have some stuff going into the house that use that Bible verse, and even my mom, like one Christmas, just happened to find like this baseball plaque, and it happened, and she had no idea that I was like kind of like the life verse that I live by, and it just happened to have that verse on it. So like we've used that verse with our like wedding. Brittany and I used it for our wedding, like our wedding photos, like on the jumbotron for our rehearsal dinner. That was like one of the verses that we used on the jumbotron for us.
And that verse is, recite it, please.
Commit your commit to God with or commit to God with everything, and He will lead you lead you to the right path, lead you down the right path.
Amen. Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's so cool. I appreciate you sharing that. And I know you got to run here in a little bit, so I'll give you a few more quick questions.
Alrighty.
All right. So you met your wife, Brittany. She is a former MTV challenger. She's on a couple other reality TV shows. Had you watched any of that before you had met her? Have you watched it since meeting her?
I actually watched her when she was on Are You the One. That was way before I even met her or knew anything. It happened to be one of my teammates, like, happened to just say, like, "Just watch this show, like, you might like it." Like, we
Who
both,
was
like
it? Who suggested it?
it was one of my former teammates that's from the Boston area. It's actually our mutual friend of how we met too.
Oh,
But
awesome.
we had no idea that 7 or like 7 years later that we would actually 6 years later we would actually meet in person. And like honestly, and then we never watched her when she was on. I never watched the challenge, but we only speak of it, but we never go back and watch it. It's just like that was like when we were in our 20s, like we were just growing up and trying to just learn things on our own. So it's like we all like do things in our 20s that we're not happy about, but it's also like we're also glad for those experiences because it's a big life lesson that you can that you can tell your kids about too. It's like this is like you're going to go through growing pains in life. It's like you just got to embrace the lesson that each thing brings.
Well, hey, you're just speaking about some of the stuff that maybe isn't the greatest, but she won a lot of competition. She did pretty
We did.
awesome on there.
We did. Especially like, we know we're gonna have very competitive kids. We do know that.
That's awesome. I love that. So, but you were a bigger Survivor fan.
Very, very big Survivor fan. Like growing up, me and my dad, we didn't watch season one. It was more of season two is when we first got into it, and that was when I was in fifth grade. And I remember like we very rarely would miss a season. That would be like our Wednesday night thing. Is like we would watch Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, Survivor, and then even when Amazing Race started to come on, we would watch Amazing Race, and then that would be like our Wednesday routine. So it's like when it was actually Thursday at the time, but
Yeah, it
like
was Thursday.
that
Yeah.
was like our big routine for growing up until we got really busy with like baseball and everything. I had to miss some Thursdays, but like that was pretty much watch Survivor from the beginning.
Yeah, it's the same with my family. We started watching at the very well, I remember seeing the Borneo finale of the first season, and that was just a gigantic, huge event. It was 53 million people watched it. It was this huge deal. And then I actually just spoke on a recent episode with Dr. Sean from that season of Survivor. So if the listeners are interested, you can go check that out, hear a little bit of juicy stuff about that first season. But yeah, season two, Australian Outback that was a really cool season because that was really the season that kept the show on the air, and they had a little bit more of a bigger budget. They did a lot of really cool stuff with that season. And that was another one where when Michael Scoopin fell into the fire, like if you were watching Survivor, like that's one of those events that you remember where you were when it happened.
100%. I think what also drew us to watching Survivor a little bit too was season two. There's a guy from like our area that was on it too. So like that's what made us even want to watch it more because we had somebody from our home area on the shows. It's like so now we got to watch it and see how far he makes it. And I think um That, and then season 3 when they were in Africa with, like, Ethan Zahn, like, that I think that's when, like, I was fully hooked and committed to watching it.
That was an awesome season.
Mhm.
That was a great season. Who was it that was from your area?
Jeff, I think it was Jeff, I don't remember his last
Jeff
name.
Varner.
Varner,
Yeah,
yeah.
Jeff Varner. Yeah, I've talked to him. He's a nice
Mhm.
guy.
Mhm. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I remember that, it's like, and then when he went back on, like, a couple years ago, it was a completely, like, different game for him, like, so many different adjustments that everybody had to make to the new style of game.
Do you have any favorite players on Survivor? Any people that you really enjoyed watching a lot?
Boston Rob was always one of my favorites, just from, like, the original, like, just, like, the mentality that he took to it, that you could just tell, like, he was gonna be you could almost tell he was gonna win from the beginning. And then just the personality that Rupert brought to each season was, like, one of a kind.
Man, Rupert, the first time he was on was just he was larger than life. There were a lot of people like that, like
Mhm,
Boston Rob, his first season on, they were doing commercial center around him.
mhm,
They'd never done that before to promote the show. You mentioned Survivor Africa. That was a great season. T-Bird Cooper, who made it to the Final Five. She's a dear friend of mine. She's awesome. So I love those original seasons, but
mhm.
you've stayed pretty like into it over the whole course of the
For the
show.
most Yeah, for the most part, it's like now, like, with traveling as much, it's so much lately, but, like, that's the joy of where we've come with, like, technology, like, I can go back and watch previous seasons and catch up on maybe a couple episodes that I missed here and there, like, that's the joy that, like, when it first started, like, you had to either watch it then or you missed it completely. There's no going back and rewatching
Yeah.
it. So, like, that's at least, like, I'm glad for the technology where I can go back and watch it, but, yeah, I've tried to stay true to watching as much as I can.
That was the VHS era where you pop in the VHS tape and set it to record. And if it didn't record or if someone recorded over it on accident, you were screwed. You were never going to see that thing ever again.
Exactly, and then you just gotta watch the recap, just wait for the recap, and then that's all you're gonna get.
Yeah, and then they'd typically do a recap episode
Mhm.
midway through the season, so that was useful for that too. If you missed, like, oh, I didn't see exactly why that guy got voted out. Did you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite season or two that you enjoyed or remember the most?
The Africa season, and then, the Survivor when they were in Thailand, that was a big one I remember, but then especially when they started going and being more permanent in Fiji, I think that's when, like, those are all the new seasons because, like, being in the same location, but they've always changed things up somehow, like, each and every season being in the same location, like, they even, like, some of their B-roll looks different, but they've been in the same spot for years now. So, like, I just like how they're able to just adjust to having, like, a permanent filming location.
Would you ever want to play Survivor when baseball's done?
Oh, yeah, I would love to. It's just I would have to really work on some of my skills, like fire making and just learning to more so just be like learning to live off just like coconuts and rice. That would be some of the hardest parts. But I think Brittany and I would probably want to do Amazing Race, try to do Amazing
Yeah.
Race. That's one of our with things is like if they're still casting and filming it whenever I'm done, I think we try to make a push for that.
Yeah, you guys should. That'd be awesome. And then you could do it together. It'd be
Exactly.
really cool because then she could kind of bring you into the reality TV world and you could add a little bit of like your sports background to that and competing alongside each other. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, because especially I've seen plenty of former athletes compete on both shows. It's like it's definitely doable. It's just gotta find just whenever you're done, like fully commit to being done playing. Is like now I can fully commit to preparing for either show.
Yeah, Brad Culpepper, he did pretty well as a Survivor contestant. Jeff Kent did pretty
Yeah,
well. Jeff
John Rocker did not do well.
You were probably pretty excited to see him as a Braves fan.
I was, but I knew people would recognize him right away, and like people would just try to get him out right away. But I know like Jeff Kent kind of just flew under the radar because like especially being a West Coast player, like you probably got there might have been a lot of people on that show that didn't stay up to watch West Coast baseball, so like he gets able to fly under the radar that way.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There was only that one girl, Dawson, who
Mhm.
strangely recognized him, but then
Yeah,
she didn't out him at all, and then no
yeah,
one else seemed to know that he was a former baseball player.
exactly, exactly. You just got to go in with the right story and just keep the cover up.
Scott Pollard just he just went in and owned it. He's like, "I'm Scott Pollard." Like, he was a fun villain. He was fun to
Yeah,
watch. I'm trying to think who else. Gary Hogaboom. Do you remember Gary Hogaboom on Survivor Guatemala?
I don't remember
Okay.
that one.
That was a while back, but he was the first one, and his whole thing was he went to, I think it was Central Michigan or Western Michigan, one of those schools, and he was a career backup for the most part,
Hmm.
an NFL quarterback, and someone recognized him on the other tribe, and people were like, "You're Gary Hogaboom." He's like, "No, I'm actually Gary Hawkins. I'm a landscaper." And they're like, "Wait, did you go to Central Michigan?" He's like, "Yeah, I did go to Central Michigan, but my name's Gary Hawkins." They're like, "Wait, you look just like Gary Hogaboom, like, and you went to the same school as him, like." So don't do that. All right, well, Ryan, I can tell you got to run now. Your phone's buzzing, so thank you so much for coming on. This is a lot of fun. Maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me on. I had a very good time.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. All right, y'all. That concludes today's conversation with Ryan Dole. We are wishing him the best and hoping he can get back up to the big league soon. Hopefully, he gets a spring training invitation, gets a chance to land on a big league roster and be the next great story. As there have been a lot of guys who've taken some time and gone and played in the indie leagues, or they've gone and played in Japan and they've come back. And his career, he's 33 years old. He's still got some years left. So, hoping that he is able to do that. I very much enjoyed my conversation with him today, and hopefully you guys did as well. Make sure you guys subscribe to the Jack Vita Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever it is that you are listening to this podcast. We're going to speak with another pitcher. This guy, this should be coming out sometime next week. You guys are listening to this. Yeah. So this will be probably next week's episode and potentially some more episodes along the way as well. But I'm going to speak with JP France. He's been a pitcher in the Astros system for the last few years, and he was just added to the Astros 40-man roster. I think he's actually on their active roster too, hoping to make his big league debut. Should be next spring. So this spring coming up, he should be getting his crack at the big leagues, hopefully. So we're going to talk with him. He's also a man of faith, so we're going to talk some faith. We're going to talk some baseball. And I've also been told that he's a big fan of the movie Mean Girls, so maybe we'll talk some Mean Girls as well. His wife, Jessica France, was on the challenge, like Ryan's wife, Brittany, was. They were actually on the show together, and they're good friends. And Jess was someone that we did a podcast with last summer. Very fun, very interesting conversation. So be on the lookout for that episode and be on the lookout for more coming soon from the Jack Vita Show. So make sure you guys are all subscribed to the Jack Vita Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, wherever it is that you are listening to podcasts. You can subscribe and don't miss an episode, and follow along on social media at Jack Vita Show. And we're going to have a lot more great content coming soon. We're going to talk with JP. We're going to have some more interviews and some more analysis. Until then, I'm Jack Vita. Bring in the dancing lobsters.